hear me, right? Okay. So without wasting much time, let us get started. Okay. So myself, I am Nibha. So I have been working as a agile consultant with SkillUpRight. I am also a trainer with them. My overall experience in the field of IT is like 17 years, and I had been working as a Scrum Master come Agile coach for several multinational companies like Cognizant, Mindtree, Wipro, Deem, and Aztecsoft. So like I am a huge supporter of Agile, and I really love working in the Agile methodology. And I also love giving trainings and coaching and mentoring people to adopt to Agile framework. So without wasting much time, we can get started. Okay. So before I start off with the topic, okay, I can see 355 people. So I just wanted to know, how many of you, have any of you worked on Agile framework? Are you comfortable with Agile, or like all of you are new? So new to Agile, I mean. So if you are like, if any one of you have worked in Agile framework earlier or know what is Agile, just ping me yes. This is just for me to know like what kind of audience I am having. Okay, I see many people already are aware of Agile. There are many who are new to Agile. Some of you are like not aware of Agile. Okay, so it's a mixed audience. Okay, yeah, I think I have got a fair idea. So yes, we can get started, folks. Okay. So Agile methodology and Scrum framework. So this is what we are going to learn today, the fundamentals of it. Okay, so yeah, so what is the agenda for today? So I will explain you what is the waterfall model of software development, what are the limitations of the waterfall model. Then we will come to what is Agile methodology, learn about the advantages and disadvantages of using the Agile model. Then we'll just look at some statistics, Agile versus waterfall. Then we will move on to the Scrum framework. So in that, I will explain what are the Scrum roles, Scrum pillars, Scrum events, what is a sprint, Scrum artifacts, then Scrum framework in a nutshell. And then I'll just walk you through a few important terminologies in Agile and Scrum. Okay. So let's start with what is the waterfall model of software development. So many of you might know this is like the waterfall model has been in existence for a long time, and many organizations were working primarily on the waterfall model before making the shift to Agile model. Okay, so what is the waterfall model? So the waterfall model is a linear developmental model. Okay, so okay, somebody has raised a hand. Any questions or anything? Okay, I will continue. Okay, so yeah, so it's a linear development model. So what does that mean? So an application or whatever the development is happening, okay, it will go from one phase to the other only when the previous phase is completed. Okay, so now what does that mean? So when you get a requirement for any to build a software or to build an application, okay, so you will get the requirements first. This is the waterfall model. So you will get the requirements, then you will spend time on analyzing the requirements. Then we will be going to the design phase where we will come up with the architecture and all the different components that would be required. Then we would be going to the coding phase. Coding also includes all your packaging, compiling, and unit testing, all of these things. Then we go to the user testing, the testing phase. And finally, it goes to the acceptance phase. So in this waterfall model, all these things happen step by step, one after the other. Okay. So if it is a very large project, for example, so suppose you want to build a big application, say a railway reservation system, and then you get say 100 requirements for it. So if you are following the waterfall model, what will happen is first you will get all the 100 requirements. That is the expectation, that we should receive all the 100 requirements at one shot. And then we will spend maybe months together to understand the requirements, to see what exactly, that everybody has understood the requirements, that how it can be broken down. So basically the requirements understanding itself will take probably a month or two. Okay. So after that, what we will do, then we will go to the analysis phase. In some cases, like, requirements and analysis happen together. So basically you get the requirements and then you go to the, only when you have got all your requirements, you go to the analysis phase. Then you spend a lot of time, maybe months, a couple of months, to do all the analysis, like what will fit into your organization's requirements, what technologies you would be using. So all the analysis you would be doing. And after that, you will be going to the design phase when all the analysis is finalized, what kind of approach, what kind of model, everything you will be using is finalized. Then you go to the design phase. So that in the design phase, then again, you spend a couple of months or even more designing the architecture, understanding like what are the different components or layers that are required to build this particular application. Once the design is finalized, then you would go to the coding phase, where again, it might take months or it might take years together. It might take a year or two to do all the coding. There will be thousands and thousands of lines of code you will be writing, you will be compiling, you will be packaging. Only after that, you will be putting it to the testing phase. Okay. Now what happens? All of the stages have done, maybe a year has passed. All this while the testing team had nothing much to do in this project. Maybe they were involved in some other project. Now they have come into the picture for this project, and they are going to do the testing. So during the testing, now if the then they have to test a lot of things together. Maybe they have to test all the 100 requirements together. They have to kind of understand all the requirements, and then there might be a lot of bugs, there might be a lot of misunderstandings that would have happened, and finally they have to test a lot of things at one shot. And then after the testing is done, it goes to acceptance. Okay. Now, when I have explained this itself, you would have understood or got a fair idea of what could be the limitations of a waterfall model. Okay. So now we move on to limitations of the waterfall model. So now, as I have been saying, that you do the things in a linear manner, one after the other. Only when one phase is completed, you go to the next phase. For any kind of project, what are the threats or the risk that it poses? Okay, if we work in this model, waterfall. So what happens? Complete requirements should be available at the time of the project commencement. So as I said, you are expecting all requirements to be there because you are not going to make any changes. You don't have any scope of making any changes in between. You complete one stage and you go to the next. So you are expecting that all the requirements are available to you at the beginning of the project. Okay, to you means to your team or the company or the organization who is doing the project. So no working software is produced until later in the life cycle. So you have to wait maybe months or even years to have a working software which you can actually deliver it to the market or to your client. Okay. Defects are detected later in the life cycle, which makes it challenging, time consuming and expensive to fix those defects. So as I was saying, the testing team comes into picture much later. And then if they identify defects, you can think that, such a large code base or thousands and thousands of lines of code, you need to debug and you need to find out where the defect has occurred and how you need to fix it. So it becomes very time consuming, and it also becomes expensive because of the amount of effort that will have to be put into that to identify the defect and fix those. Okay. Then there is no scope of adding any new or changing the change in existing requirement during the development. So if there is anything new, the customer or wants to make a small change also, they cannot do it in the middle of this development life cycle, because the requirements are fixed and only stage by stage you are doing everything. So there is no scope of any changing requirement or any adjustments throughout until the project is delivered. Okay. limited stakeholder involvement. So as there is no transparency, so nobody is going to know who has, what work is being done. Are we doing it in the right manner? So none of these are visible to anybody. Not ideal for complex projects, as these projects need flexibility and may have changing requirements. So as I said, like if it is a complex project, if it is a large project, everything cannot be perfect from the word go, right? From the beginning, there might be some, even the customer would have visualized the requirements not in the right manner. Maybe they want to make any changes. So if there is no scope for that kind of flexibility is not there, and you can never take in the changing requirements, okay? So these are the limitations of the waterfall model. So basically, waterfall model is a sequential manner of project development, in which you will not be able to have a working software until the end of the project. All the 100 requirements has to be completed at one shot and delivered, in which case, if there is any defect found, or if there are any change in requirements are to be made, then it becomes very, very difficult to do that in case of a waterfall model. Okay. So I hope you have understood so far. Okay. Okay. Fine. I'll move on to the, before moving on, I just want to make one statement that like though waterfall model has a lot of limitations, there are a couple of advantages, like it's very easy to understand, and it's a very laid back kind of work model where, you don't have to be on your toes all the time. So it kinds of gives that leisure to the development team. I mean, development team, when I say, it's the entire team. And also it will help in, like, it's much easier to understand. Okay. So these are a couple of advantages of the waterfall model. Now let's move on to Agile. So what is Agile methodology? So now, like waterfall model, it takes a long time before you deliver anything to the customer. But in Agile is a software development model which promotes incremental and iterative development and testing throughout the software development lifecycle. So here what happens is, we are delivering in increments and in iterations. Okay. So it is never a long process where all the requirements come at one shot, and then you would work on all the requirements and at one shot, and only then you deliver it to the customer. Here what happens, we take in small requirements for a small period of time, which is called an iteration. And then every iteration, we are going to deliver some working model to the customer. Now, again, going back to the railway reservation system. Okay. So now, suppose the main functionality is you should be able to search and book. Okay. There might be multiple functionalities or features that we would like to provide as part of the railway reservation system. So things can be added one by one. Focus first on search, deliver it in a few iterations. I will come to explain more in detail about iterations, but you deliver it in a couple of iterations. Then you deliver the book in couple of iterations. Your basic model to do a railway reservation is ready. Okay. You don't have to wait for the entire railway reservation system to be built with all the features like in the waterfall model for a couple of years. So here within say a month or two, you will be able to deliver something working. Customers can already start using that. And then you keep adding to the existing system. You work in iterations and deliver something new every time. Okay. So this Agile is an iterative and incremental way of software development. So each project is broken down into several iterations. So as I said, so project is broken down into iterations. So this iteration is nothing but a time box period. Okay. It can be 2 weeks, it can be 4 weeks. Usually we don't suggest it should be more than 4 weeks. So within that 2 weeks, the team should be able to deliver something which is working. So within the 2 or 4 weeks. Okay, so the entire requirements is broken down in such a way. We will go into that when we learn about Scrum. So entire requirements is broken down into a small piece of user stories, which can be delivered in in this time box periods called iterations. So each iteration will be of the same duration. So between 2 to 4 weeks. So each iteration, it's not like one iteration is 2 weeks, next iteration is 3 weeks, again, the next iteration is 2 weeks. It's not like that. So every iteration, if we start with a project, say the railway reservation system, in the project planning in the beginning itself, we will decide the team as a whole. It's not like somebody is directing, there's a hard and fast rule that it should be so many weeks. The team as a whole will decide that, okay, we will consider each iteration to be a 2 weeks iteration or a 3 weeks iteration, but we have to stick to that. Okay. So at the end of each iteration, a working product should be delivered. So ultimate thing is that at the end of every iteration, you are going to deliver something to the customer. Okay, so it's a very flexible model where you can predict the risk. Even during the testing phase, if some issue is found, how much code they have to go back and change. It's only hardly 2 weeks work that you have to go back and change, or it will be very few lines of code where you can easily find the bug and you can go and fix it. Uncertainty is less and there is more flexibility, there is more interaction with the customer. You get very quick feedback when the product goes to a customer. If they are not happy or if it is not understood correctly and built in a different way, it's just 2 weeks of work that might be lost, or it might have to be reworked, not an entire 2 years of work, right? So if you look at this diagram, so what happens in an agile model is like you plan and then this goes on in a cycle, okay, within an iteration. So in the waterfall model, sorry, one second. So in the waterfall model, whatever was happening in phases one after the other, all these things happens within an iteration of 2 or 3 weeks itself. Like you plan, you design, develop, test, deploy, you review means you get the feedback from the customer or your product owner. Again, you plan, again, you go to the next iteration and the same thing continues. So within an iteration of 2 or 3 weeks, whatever is done in the waterfall model for so long time is done, which makes the cycle very less, and you are able to deliver more faster, efficiently, and up to the satisfaction. Okay, so this is the agile methodology. So now I already explained, but I'll just read through once. So advantages of using agile model. So what is it? So superior quality product. Okay, because you are having more control on the product, you are getting constant feedback, you are interacting constantly with the team, with the stakeholders. So you are able to build a superior quality product. Then you have better control because it's hardly 2 or 3 weeks. You have better control on your what you are developing and testing. So you can make changes, you can go back and fix the issues. So you have better control on the project. Reduce risk, very straightforward, because you don't have to wait for 2 years to know that, okay, the entire thing is broken. Just 2 weeks, you get to know where the issue is and you can fix it easily. Continuous improvement. So every iteration you find something that you have not, I will come to that later, but you will come to know that, okay, something which you had not done correctly in the previous iteration, there is always scope of improvement in the next iteration. More relevant metrics. So you are able to capture, like you don't have to go back to 2 years and capture all the metrics at one shot. You can keep capturing different kind of metric, and you can keep improving by inferring those metrics iteration to iteration. Customer satisfaction. Obviously, customers will be satisfied because they get some working model every 2 or 3 weeks. Improve project predictability. So yeah, predictability is more because uncertainties are less. Increased flexibility. So if there are any requirement changes also that comes, so what happens is within an iteration, the customer may say, okay, there's a small change in requirement. We want this to be done in a particular way or not how we told previously. Okay. So we can still make that adjustment because it's not a very big thing that you need to go and change. Or if the customer wants to add something new to whatever they already gave, it can be very well taken in the next iteration. It's not like they have to wait a very long time. Anybody can wait for another 2 weeks. That will not be a problem. So that kind of flexibility is there. Improve team morale. So team is also very happy because they are able to deliver, they are able to get the feedback, they are always on their toes, they always get to interact, there's a lot of transparency. So even the team is in high spirits. There is no laid back concept here at all. Okay, so these are the advantages of using the agile model. So okay, there are a couple of questions. I may not be able to take all the questions. I also have a hard stop at 4:15. I have a meeting. Okay, so a couple of questions I'll just take up. can't okay, so you are saying we start with basic and most important feature. So that depends upon the customer. If the customer wants a particular feature to be done first, okay, so that will be based on the priority, so we can deliver that first. So that is something the product owner, the customer, they will together decide like which feature they wants to be delivered at the beginning. Obviously it will be the most important feature, but they don't have to wait for a year or two to get that feature. They will get it within an iteration. So that will be based on the prioritization. Okay. Can't iteration cycle be more than 4 weeks, like say 2 months? So see, 4 weeks is ideal, because if you go to longer periods, right? So there again, the uncertainties increase. So every iteration, if it is like wherever I have worked, we always used to follow 2 weeks iteration. So it is ideal to keep it max at 4 weeks. That is my suggestion, but some organizations do that. Okay. How iteration 1 and 2 are interconnected, or the data holds dependency, how to solve it? Yeah. So iteration 1 and 2 are like, it is just of it's a time box period. So in iteration 1, what I will come to that later, maybe then you will understand. Okay. I will not take up this question now, because in detail we have that. Okay. So how to collate requirements code from multiple persons? So multiple persons means you will have one product owner or a business analyst who will collate all the requirements. It's not like the team has to go and collect. So the product owners, they will keep working with the customers, and they will have the requirements, and that will be broken down into different user stories. And based on the priority, we will be picking it up. Okay. So okay. So we will move on then. Okay. All right. Are we good to move on? I believe so. Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. Slides are not in. Okay, so the disadvantages of Agile. Okay, definitely every model, there will be some disadvantages, or there will be some loopholes. So Agile also has its own disadvantages accordingly. What are a few disadvantages of Agile? So lack of documentation. So here, what happens is Agile is like, as I have been saying that, we are working in iterations of say 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. So compared to waterfall model, like waterfall model, each phase has a long duration. You can spend a lot of time on a single phase, do all the detailed documentation, everything. But in Agile, you are always on your toes, and you have to deliver something. So you don't have that much time to keep focusing on documentation. We'll do the minimal documentation and we will move ahead. So that way for the team, it is good, because many people in my team also, we used to be happy that, we don't have to do the documentation. But what happens is, when a new team member joins, or, this project is moved to say some other team, then that lack of documentation is like, that creates some gap where, you might have to give more detailed KT because the documentation is not there. So scope creeps due to insufficient documentation and clear vision of final product. So because the proper documentation is not there, so some people may misunderstand the requirements, or it is easy for people to say that, okay, because it was not documented, I did not understand clearly. Okay, that can be like a excuse if something is not working. The level of collaboration required may be difficult to maintain. So sometimes what happens, you need to collaborate with a lot of people, your customers, of course, the product owner, then other stakeholders, because of time zone issue, or because of, unavailability of certain people at a certain period of time. So that kind of collaboration, to maintain that kind of collaboration, sometimes becomes difficult. Risk of rework is more due to constantly changing customer needs. Okay. And second, I'll read the next point, then I'll explain. Projects may get infinite due to ever evolving features. So what happens is, in some cases, right, the customers tend to take advantage of using the Agile model, because we are thinking, okay, we are Agile. So how many ever times I want, I can go ahead and change the requirements. Okay. So today I think something, tomorrow I think that, okay, I don't want what I thought yesterday. I want to do something new. I inform the team. Day after tomorrow, again, I think, okay, no, what I thought yesterday was not right. I am changing the requirements. So that causes a pressure for the team, because Agile means you are able to accommodate requirements in a logical manner, not like just because it is agile, you are just giving that, you are taking it as an advantage and keeping on changing the requirements every time. Because in that case, you will get into an infinite loop and you will never be able to complete what you actually plan for that iteration. So if the requirement changing should not be so constant that, it is like every 2 days you have to go and rework on what you have done. It should be something like, okay, if this iteration I have done something, next iteration the customer thinks that, okay, there are some small changes to what he or she has given before. In the next iteration we can take up. At least within the iteration, we should try to stick to whatever we have already planned for it. Okay. So for complex projects, the resource requirement and effort are difficult to estimate. So here, because you will not be getting sufficient time to, analyze or understand everything, you just have to get on to with doing the things. So you may not be, so effort estimation may become little difficult, because sometimes you are expected to start the work without understanding the complete thing, because there is always scope that in the next iteration, you might still be able to work on something which has come newly, or if there's a change in requirement. But to give an overall estimate for the entire project is little difficult, because you are never going to, because the requirements would be changing, and also you don't have that much time to invest to come up with the actual estimation. Okay, so these are some disadvantages of Agile. But advantages always are taking an upper hand in the case of Agile. At least that has been my experience all these years. Okay, so this is just a comparison by some statistics, Agile versus Waterfall by numbers. So here you can see the project failure rates by project size. Okay, so Agile and Waterfall. So you can see whether it is small projects, medium projects, or large projects. So Agile failure rates are much lower than the Waterfall. Okay, if it is the larger the project, the failure rates are actually higher in Waterfall. Okay. So in case of success rates also, you can see that Agile, the success rates are much higher. Okay, so this is just some statistics. Yeah, now we will move on to the Scrum framework. Okay. Okay, can I move on, folks? Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to what is the Scrum framework. Okay, so Scrum, so Agile, it's in itself is an umbrella. Okay, so Agile is a methodology, it's a set of principles, but Agile itself has multiple frameworks under it. One of them is the Scrum framework. Similarly, we have Kanban, we have less, extreme, safe. So there are many frameworks under Agile, but the most widely used is the Scrum framework. So in today's agenda, I will be covering only the Scrum framework because it is the most widely used, and a lot of organizations are using the Scrum framework. Okay. Okay. So what is the Scrum framework? So the Scrum is a framework to build software product by following Agile principles. Scrum employs an iterative and incremental approach to optimize predictability and control risk. Okay, so the Scrum is basically, it's a framework in Agile where, like all this while I had been talking about iterations, right? So in Scrum framework, we work in iterations to deliver something to the customer at the end of every iteration. Okay, so it's an iterative and incremental development approach. So in Scrum, each iteration is called a sprint, okay, which is a time box event of 2 to 4 weeks in which a Scrum team completes set amount of work. So Scrum is a framework wherein you have a few terminologies like sprint, and then there are Scrum ceremonies, then we have Scrum pillars and the Scrum roles. Okay, we will go to each and you will understand. So the fundamental unit of the Scrum is the Scrum team. So the Scrum team consists of the Scrum Master, product owner, and the development team. So when you say development team, it consists of the developers as well as the testers. Okay. Scrum has 3 pillars. transparency, inspection, and adaptation. We will come to each of these in detail. And Scrum has 4 formal events within the sprint called the Scrum Ceremonies. So basically, all this while I have been calling an iteration. At the end of iteration, you deliver something. So Scrum is a framework where these iterations are called sprints. And within every sprint, you deliver something. And for that, you need to have a Scrum team. And there are 3 pillars in Scrum. That is a different thing. That is a side-by-side thing, which I will come to. And the Scrum has 4 formal events. So within that sprint, there are 4 formal events which happens for it's a must and should, and those 4 events are called the Scrum Ceremonies. All right. So the next, first we will go to the Scrum Roles. So as I said, there's a Scrum team which works on requirements and delivers in an iterative manner, sprint on sprint, which is like nothing but the iteration. And the Scrum, there are different roles within that Scrum team. Now, what are those roles? So in a Scrum team, there is no hierarchy. All team members are equal and different roles have different responsibilities. So we are focusing only on the roles. Nobody is a manager here. Nobody is a leader here. The Scrum team should be a self-organized, self-managed team where we just collaborate as a team in different roles to deliver something. Nobody can direct someone to do something. Nobody is a project manager. Nobody is a team lead or a tech lead or something like that. Okay. All the people are equal. So the product owner. So the product owner owns what is desired and why it is desired. So basically the product owner is the one who will talk to the customers and he will have the requirements ready. He will be the one who will be like, coming up with all the requirements and coming up with all the features, what is required to build that particular system. The Scrum Master. So the Scrum Master is the keeper of the Scrum process and the facilitator. So he or she is like the one who is collaborating and facilitating the different discussions, reaching out to people, helping the team remove their impediments, talking to the people, bringing the product owner and the Scrum team members together. Okay, so the Scrum Master wears different hats. There are a lot of things that the Scrum Master needs to coordinate between different groups of people, inside and outside of the Scrum team. The Scrum team members. So they own how and how quickly work is delivered. So they are the ones who will say that, okay, this is what the estimation is. This is how quickly we can deliver. This is how many sprints we will take to deliver the entire project. So the development team will own what they are going to deliver and how quickly they are going to deliver. Okay. So the Scrum pillars. So these are just the pillars of Scrum, just for your understanding. We are not bringing it into the daily working model, but you just have to understand this. Okay. So what are the Scrum pillars? Transparency, inspection, adaptation. So as I have been saying, transparency, like the Agile itself is a very transparent model. So, there's a lot of collaboration, there is continuous feedback, and again, you work on the feedback. So there is a lot of to and fro collaboration that is happening. Your customers get to see your working model in 2 or 3 weeks time. And, there's nothing hidden basically. Everything is transparent within the stakeholders and the Scrum team. Inspection. So every 2 weeks, the stakeholders as well as the team, the product owner, everybody will inspect what work you have delivered, how well you have delivered, whether it is according to the acceptance criteria or not. And if there is any change, if the product owner or the stakeholders point out that, something is not as per their expectation, then you have to adopt and make the change in the next iteration to make the change and deliver it again in the way that is required. Okay. So transparency. Inspection is you continuously keep inspecting what work you have done, because you are reviewing every 2 weeks. You get to know what work you are delivering, and based on any deviation that has been noticed, the team will adapt to the new changes, and as soon as possible they will again be able to deliver the new changes in the next iteration. All right. Now the Scrum events and ceremonies. So within the sprint, okay, so within that the duration of 2 or 4 weeks maximum, what are the things that the Scrum team will do? So there are 4 events in Scrum within containing event called the sprint. So that containing event is called the sprint, as I said, which is the iteration. So there are 4 events in this iteration or in the sprint: sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. Okay, we'll look at each one. So the sprint. So the sprint is a fixed length event, usually of 2 to 4 weeks, decided by the product owner and team. I'm just reading through because I have been keeping on saying this about the sprint. In a sprint, planned amount of work has to be completed and delivered. So in a sprint, the team will decide what you want to deliver within that sprint based on the priorities and the requirements that the product owner has lined up. The team will decide, along with the inputs from the product owner, within the period of 2 weeks or 3 weeks, what is that the most important part of the application that the team would want to deliver. So the new sprint starts immediately after the conclusion of the previous sprint. So there is no gap in between the iterations. So one iteration, if it starts on Monday, if it is a 2 weeks, the 2 Mondays after the first Monday, the previous iteration will close and the next iteration will start. So anything that happens, whether there are any leave plans or whether there are any holidays, so everything will be accounted for within that sprint itself. So accordingly, there is something called capacity planning. So if there is any holidays or any leave plans, everything will be accommodated. Accordingly, only the team will pick up the work within that sprint. So every sprint, it may not be the equal amount of work that can be picked up because there may be longer leave plans or there may be some holidays. According to the capacity, the team will decide how much they can deliver within that sprint. Okay, but the sprint will always remain of the fixed duration and it will start and end on the same day. Okay, a sprint could be cancelled if the sprint goal becomes obsolete. This is something which happens very rarely because sometimes suppose we are working on a project and then suddenly out of the blue, the product owner comes and says that whatever work we have been doing in this sprint is totally kind of nullified, or the customer doesn't want it anymore. Then we just cancel the sprint and again we start off newly. Okay. We may have a short-term duration. If the sprint is of 2 weeks, after 1 week, if they say that this sprint is totally, like whatever work we have planned is totally now not required, then maybe we will just skip 1 week and we will consider only one small half sprint and we will set new goals and we will start working. But don't worry much on it because this is very, very rare case. In my career, at least, I have never come across this, having to cancel a sprint. Okay. So what is sprint planning? So sprint planning happens at the beginning of the sprint. So the first event that happens at the beginning of the sprint on the first day is the sprint planning. So the sprint planning is a meeting where the team decides what can be delivered in the sprint. Okay, so there will be a set of requirements which is called a product backlog. I'll just come to that little later. So from the product backlog, the team will decide what can be delivered within that sprint. Everything cannot be delivered. Maybe if there are 20 items in the list, maybe the first 5 items can be delivered in iteration 1. The next 5 items can be delivered in iteration 2. So that is how the team will decide what they can deliver. The entire Scrum team is involved in the sprint planning. The whole Scrum team collaborates to define a sprint goal based on the product owner's directions on value creation. So once you decide, the product owner will say, okay, these are the top 5 things that we have to deliver the customer wants from this iteration. So accordingly, the sprint goal will be set. And this goal will be mapped to the user stories, whether you are using Jira or Rally or whatever, it will be a user story in that particular tool. And the goals will be mapped to, maybe one goal can be mapped to 2 user stories, or it can be a one-on-one mapping, but the sprint goal will be set in that sprint planning meeting. With the help of the product owner, developers select items to work on in current sprint from the product backlog. Then sprint planning meeting can be time boxed to 8 hours for a 4-week sprint. Okay, so this is actually a statement in a Scrum guide where it says that if the company or the team is following a 4-week sprint, then the sprint planning meeting can be done up to a maximum of 8 hours. If it is less than a 4-week sprint, say if it is a 3 weeks or 2 weeks, they have not mentioned any specific number of hours. It can be something less than 8 hours. Okay, so usually any company hardly like 1 or 2 hours of sprint planning usually they do. Okay. So the next one is a daily scrum. So the daily scrum, it is a daily meeting among developers to discuss progress towards the sprint goal and make adjustments if needed. So the daily scrum is something where the team comes together and they will collaborate every single day in the sprint and understand how they are making the progress towards the sprint goal. If anybody is facing any issues, if there is anything that the scrum master or product owner can help with, so all these things the team will discuss. It's not like you are giving updates to somebody. Okay, that is a wrong notion. If anybody is has that kind of understanding, it is a wrong notion. It is the team who is coming together to discuss along with product owner and scrum master what they are going to, like if they are having any blockers, what they have worked on yesterday, what they are going to work on today, and they just discuss and they make sure that they are aligned with the scrum goal, sorry, with the sprint goal, and that if any adjustments needs to be made. Okay. Daily Scrum is a 15-minute meeting, and it is ideal to be held at the same time and place every day to reduce complexity. So ideally, it should be kept at the same time. It's not like today we are keeping it at morning 10 a.m., tomorrow at 12 p.m. So then what happens? People have to keep remembering. Okay. So it is ideal to always keep it at the same time so that you don't even have to look at your calendars. You know that 10 a.m. you have to meet for the daily Scrum, and nobody has to have any confusions about this meeting. Okay, and what do we discuss? As I said, what did you do yesterday? What will you do today? And are there any impediments or any blockers? Okay, so these are the only things that we need to discuss. If any detailed discussions are required on any particular technical discussions or any kind of clarifications with the product owner, then those should be done only after you have completed the daily, the exchange of information, and then only the concerned parties can stay back and they can discuss, because we don't want to waste everybody's time by having all the people discuss on just one single thing. Okay. Then next, the sprint review. So far we have seen that sprint planning, then the daily scrum. Now the next one is the sprint review. Okay, so what is the sprint review? So it is nothing but the demo that we do after the work is completed in the 2 weeks or 3 weeks iteration time. We showcase that work to the stakeholders. Okay, so that is called a sprint review. The work done in the sprint is showcased by the developers to the stakeholders at the end of the sprint. The stakeholders, product owners, scrum master, developers, management, and customers can attend the meeting. So this sprint review meeting is the one that, it will have a bigger audience. The stakeholders will be there. Even your company management people, like leadership people, if they are interested, you can invite them also to see what you have delivered. But they should not be having a say on the day-to-day things, because the Scrum team themselves are a mature team who has to take the decisions how the project they are going to deliver. But definitely during the sprint review meeting, you can have your leadership and other people attending so that you can showcase your work to them. It should be a working session where team demos the actual work done. So you are actually, it's not like a presentation or something. You actually showcase the work from your computer or from the the QA environment or whatever, but you actually show what the working software. Based on the inputs from this meeting, team can decide what to do next, or if any adjustments need to be made in the product backlog. So now everybody has seen what you have done in the 2 weeks. Okay. Sometimes it might happen that the customer is having certain apprehensions about the way we have done it, or maybe they have given some requirement we have not understood in the right manner and developed something little different. So all these things will be discussed and brought up during the sprint review meeting, if at all anything like that comes up, and that will be noted down by the product owner or even the anybody else in the Scrum team, which can come as a separate work item in the upcoming iteration. If it is something very, very important or a big change, then it can be taken up as a top priority in the next iteration. If it is something very minor or like a good to have, it can be taken up in upcoming iterations also, not necessarily the immediate next iteration. Okay, but at least the feedback will be collected and it will be documented. The meeting can be 4 hours long for a 4-week sprint. So if you are following a 4-week sprint, and if it is a 4-hour long meeting, nobody can actually question you. Okay, so this is what the Scrum Guide says, but nobody does it. People hardly do it, maximum for 1 hour. But if it is really something very big that you have to showcase, so nobody can stop you from doing a 4-hour long sprint review. Okay. The last event or the ceremony that is done within the sprint is the sprint retrospective. So what do we do in a sprint retrospective? So here, the sprint retrospective happens at the end of the sprint. And basically the sprint review and the retrospective can happen on the same day. Due to lack of time, you can do it 1 day later also, not an issue, but it has to happen. Okay. So Scrum team looks back on what went well and what did not go well during the sprint. So there are many templates you will find online also for doing sprint retrospective. There are many fun ways you can do polls, but ultimate thing what needs to come out is the team should speak up about what they felt they did good in the sprint or what they did not do good. It is basically a constructive discussion where team members just try to identify what they could have done better, which can be taken up as an action item for the next sprint, not to repeat mistakes from the previous sprint. It is just to identify how we can do the upcoming iterations better. Okay. Team identifies improvements which are addressed as soon as possible. Some improvements can be added to the sprint backlog to be worked upon in next sprint. So if it is something with respect to the work, or if it is something like a tech debt or something that you identify, okay, so that also can be, after discussion with the product owner, it can be added to the sprint backlog in some future iteration, and it can be worked upon. Some action items may not be related to the project at all. It might be that you didn't have a good environment. You had a lot of, environment issues, instability, or even some issues like, you did not have a good network. All these things can be discussed in the sprint retrospective, or some unplanned leaves. Okay, so everything, and how we can maybe, just find a backup if at all possible. If not possible, fine, but at least everybody will know about it. Okay, the retrospective meeting can be a maximum of 3 hours for a 4-week sprint. So if it is a 4-week sprint, you can go for a retrospective of 3 hours also, but usually all these meetings, people limit it to 1 hour only. Okay, but no harm in keeping it up to 3 hours. So far we have learned in this section that, Scrum, about the Scrum framework, which is nothing but it is a type of Agile framework wherein we work in iterations. These iterations are called sprints. Who work on the Scrum methodology is the Scrum team, and the Scrum has 4 different events within the iteration, which is the sprint planning, like daily Scrum, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. All clear? So somebody is asking, just a couple of questions I'll take. What is the difference between iteration and sprint? I think I repeated multiple times that iteration is nothing but a sprint. In Scrum, the iteration is called a sprint. Okay. User stories is the requirements. User stories is the requirement which you work within the sprint or the iteration. Okay. Product backlog. What is product backlog? I will come to that. That would be the last part. Okay. Okay, whatever significant questions I saw, I have just answered. Okay, let us move on. Can I move on, guys? Okay. Okay. Okay, so Scrum Artifacts. So this is probably the last slide, which I will explain. So there were some questions also around it. So Scrum Artifacts. Artifacts means what? Some, some tangible objects, right? So that is the artifacts. So in Scrum, what are the artifacts? So there are 3 artifacts in Scrum: the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment. What is the product backlog? So the product backlog is nothing but all the requirements that your product owner or your product management team will bring to the table. So if like, you know, there will be like, say for the initially when I was telling you about the waterfall model, about the railway reservation system. Okay, so the in case of waterfall model, all the 100 requirements that are needed to develop that system has to come in the beginning only, like as I was saying. But in case of Agile or in Scrum, what can happen is the product owner may just talk to the customer and get the top 5 requirements added to the product backlog. Okay, then the team starts working on those 5. In the meantime, the work of the product owner is to keep continuously talking to the people in the like, you know, the stakeholders or the customers, and keep the building the requirements. So the product owner will keep adding requirements to the product backlog. If you are using any tool like Jira or Rally or whatever, there will be a place where the you know, the product owner will keep adding the requirements, and the team doesn't have to worry. It is the product owner's job to bring all the requirements set by set or based on the priority, and they will just keep adding to the product backlog. So the product backlog is nothing but it's the requirements. Okay, it can be broken down into smaller pieces, which can be further broken down after discussing with the teams. But at the feature level, the product will keep adding requirements to the product backlog. So the set of requirements is called the product backlog. It is nothing else. Okay, now the sprint backlog. Sprint backlog is what? Like, as I said, at the time of the sprint planning, the team will decide out of the so many 100 items in the product backlog, which are the ones that they are of the highest priority to the customer, as well as what the team can work on. Okay, usually the team will work on the top 5 or 6 or whatever priorities based on team's capacity only, which will be guided by the product owner. So the team and the product owner together will decide in the sprint planning what they can deliver within that iteration, within that period of 2 to 4 weeks, what the team can deliver. So that will be brought onto the sprint board. Again, if you're using Jira or Rally or anything, that's a sprint board is there. That will be a totally different topic, which I don't want to cover now. But how it is picture means how it is visualized, don't worry about that. Just think that the sprint backlog is a subset of the product backlog, what the team can deliver within that iteration of 2 to 4 weeks. Okay, so that is the sprint backlog. And the sprint backlog, like as I said, will have a sprint goal. So you just define in sentences like, you know, what is the sprint goal at the time of the sprint planning. And this sprint goal will be mapped to say 6 or 7 user stories, which is the sprint backlog. The increment. So now after working for 2 weeks or 2 or 4 weeks, you are going to deliver a working software to the customer, right? So that is called the increment. So every 2 weeks or every iteration, you are going to deliver something to the customer, which is called the product increment. And definition of done is nothing but the team will come together and say when you call that increment done, basically, like, you know, you have to complete all your testing, you have to do all your like automation, the code coverage should be say 80% or whatever. So the team together, it's a guideline, basically, the definition of done. So that the team will do at the beginning of the project, sometimes or within that iteration, that okay, this is what the definition of done will be for our project. And the increment, if it meets that, that means it is ready to be deployed to production. So these are the Scrum artifacts: product backlog, sprint backlog, and increment. So I hope you have understood. Okay. Okay. So I think we are at the end of our yeah, so this is the Scrum framework in a nutshell. Is just whatever I have been talking all this while. This you can kind of visualize it. Okay, so this is the product backlog. The product will keep adding requirements to the product backlog, whether it is in a Jira tool or whether it is in a like on paper or in Confluence or some kind of tool. They will just keep adding the requirements. From there, after discussion with the product owner in the sprint planning, we will create the sprint backlog, what we want to deliver in that particular iteration. Okay, so once we have defined the sprint backlog, then in this cycle, this is the iteration, 2 weeks iteration, where the Scrum team will meet on a daily basis, discuss what they are working on, if there are any blockers, etc. And after 2 weeks, they are going to deliver an increment to the customer. So this will be seen by the customer. Means sprint review also will happen. They will deliver as well as there will be a sprint review. So in the sprint review, like as I had said, if there is anything that any feedback or any deviations that is noticed, again, the product owner will take that as a feedback and create a requirement and put it back in the product backlog. So then as per the priority or the requirement, again, it can be planned for a sprint in upcoming iterations, and the same thing will continue. Okay. So along with the sprint review, we will also have the sprint retrospective. So any action items that may come up with the sprint from the sprint retrospective can be taken as an action item or as a as a user story in the next sprint planning, and it can be taken up in the sprint. So this is the Scrum framework in a nutshell. Okay. So a few important terminologies. So here, very simple, a few like user story. I already said it's like a feature or a module. It's the smallest unit of requirement which the team can work on. Epic, it's a collection of user stories. So say the train reservation system, say for booking, okay. So booking part, it may have different things like the booking with credit card or booking with like online payment. Each one may be a user story. So the booking part alone, different user stories will together form an epic. So that epic will have every user story with respect to that booking. Okay, so the epic can be for booking, it can be for search, it can be for some additional features. So that is how the product owner and the team organizes the work. That's all about it. Product backlog, I already explained, contains list of user stories prepared by product owner. Story point. So story point is a relative estimation technique. That itself is a separate topic altogether, but it's an estimation technique. Why I am just calling this out is because you will hear this on a constant basis when you are working on Agile. Okay, so these are a few important terminologies. So that is all I have. Okay. And okay, one second, the screen sharing has stopped, it's saying. Okay, so now, one second. Okay, so yeah, we are on time. I will just see if there are any questions which I can take up. So there are several limitations for waterfall model. So when do we use waterfall model? I think, I mean, that was something which was being used for long ago. I don't think anybody now knowingly they would go for the waterfall model. Okay. So everybody is making a transition from waterfall to Agile. So Agile was not it's like some 20, 30 years back it came. But many organizations are still sticking to waterfall, and everybody is trying to make a transition to Agile. So there is no way that now somebody will go and see, find out why or where we have to use a waterfall model. Okay. How to approach if any changes in between the sprint. So this is like, if there is a change requested by the customer after you have done your sprint planning, if it is a very, very critical one, means the customer was totally wrong with the initial requirement and they are actually are giving the right requirement now. So there is no point in doing that wrong thing, right? So what you have to do, if you have to accommodate this new change in the middle of the sprint after you have already planned, you can take out something which is of less priority after discussion with the product owner, and you can take in this new requirement if it is very, very critical. Okay. If it is not critical, it is like a good to have, then always you can request the product owner, convince the customer that it will be taken up in the next iteration. We do not want to disturb the existing iteration. Okay. Difference between user story and product backlog, I already explained. Product backlog is a set of requirements. So these requirements are mapped to a single or more than one user story. So the user story is the workable piece basically, okay, which the development team will work on. Can you explain the role of a Scrum Master? So the Scrum Master is basically a keeper of the process. So, many times, I am a Scrum Master. So people, when they come newly, if they come from a waterfall model, they don't understand Agile. And the Scrum Master should be a mentor and a coach to help the people adopt to Agile. Okay. And at the same time, make sure that all the events are happening. People are not having any impediments. If there are any dependencies on other teams, then they have to reach out to the people, and they need to talk to people. They have to get the things clarified. They have to guide the team, like how to become self-independent, help them in the estimations, help the product owner while breaking down the stories, like they can help the product owner how to break down the stories which can bring maximum value to the customer. So basically the Scrum Master wears different hats, and they have to know kind of pretty much everything what is happening in the project. Okay. Difference between user stories. Agile and safe, that is safe is nothing but a different Agile framework. It is a scaled Agile framework. Basically you are taking Agile to the entire organization. So now, like Scrum, you are working for a small group of people. Okay, one thing I missed to say, a Scrum team should not be more than 9 team members. Maximum should be like 9. That is ideal, because if it has too many members, right, again, it becomes complete chaos to deliver something within 2 weeks. Okay. So if we are taking this Scrum to a organizational level, several Scrum teams together will work towards a single objective. So that is a totally different topic, and I cannot cover everything about SAFe now, but that is scaled Agile, which is scaling Agile at an organizational level. Okay. Okay, burn down chart is also like these things are like again different. Burn down chart, I can just give a quick this thing. So burn down chart is nothing but it is a we plot the number of stories against number of amount of work against a time. Okay, so when you start the sprint, say it's a 2-week sprint. Okay, so at the beginning of 2 weeks, how much work you have taken up? Say if you go by story points, say you have taken 40 story points for at the beginning of the sprint. Okay, after a week or after 2 or 3 days, that 40 story points, how much work you have burned? Basically 40 has it remained at 40 itself, or have you finished some work and brought it down to 35? Okay, so at the end of the sprint in 2 weeks, you will get to know that 40 has been brought down to whether it has been brought down to 0. That means at the end of the sprint, you have delivered everything and nothing, no work is left. Whatever you planned, you have delivered, or is something remaining. So say at the end of 2 weeks, if you have achieved 30, so you are burning down the work, but you still have 10 story points still to deliver, which might get rolled over to the next sprint. So basically the burn down chart helps you to understand against the time in the iteration, how much work you have completed and how much is remaining. Okay. We are out of time and I have a hard stop. This question I will take up last. What is sprint 0? So sprint 0, sometimes what happens is if you are going to work on a completely new project, okay, team is new, the project is new, everything is new. So sprint 0 is nothing but you are just preparing yourself to start with the sprints, okay? So within that iteration, you are kind of doing the analysis, you are kind of trying to find out who will work on what and how we are going to carry ourselves as a team, what are the requirements, whatever means the basic like a kickoff. You don't actually start with the work, but you try to get an understand. This happens for completely new projects. If a new project has come totally new, like the railway reservation system you have never worked on before and it has come, so we spend say one sprint, which is again a fixed length of 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. We call that a sprint 0, and it will be made visible to the management and to everybody that we will not going to deliver any increment as part of sprint 0. Okay, so sprint 0 is just to understand the requirements, structure your team, what automation framework you will use, what kind of technologies you will use, what tools would be required for you to install to work on that project. So all these things the team members will just discuss and they will come up with and keep everything ready. Okay, but why we are calling it a sprint zero? We don't want that to be unstructured. So it should be within the sprint. It should not break the continuity of the sprint. That is why that is the sprint zero. Okay. So I think we will have to stop at this. So please leave a feedback and let me know how the session was. Have you understood? If there are any questions that you would still have, you can shoot an email and we will try our best to answer. So thank you, folks.